back. Welcome back, listener. This is Aaron Richmond. You're listening to the Aaron's Opinion podcast on Caroline Radio, Blind Advocate Radio, almost anywhere you get your podcast, YouTube, Twitter, and of course, Patreon. We're very pleased to have Harry joining us from London. What I want to talk about in basically the remaining half is so, really, this question has been posed to me before. How did you become interested in working with an organization that specifically helps blind people? Do you maybe have a friend who's blind? Do you have someone in your family who is blind? How did you become familiar with, the blindness world and working in this field? What do you think?
Yes, but when I got the concept sort of sent through, it was just on an email about a digital marketing internship. Read more about it and sort of learned that it was for visually impaired people. But I've never had. I don't know anyone who is visually impaired. I've got no one in my family who's visually impaired. I don't know anyone who is visually impaired. So it's sort of like a new concept to me. Of course, I know about blind people, but I guess throughout this, I've probably learned a lot more about blindness in general. In terms of that, before I sort of thought, oh, being blind, you probably can't see anything. But I guess that's that is a myth or a misconception in that
Right,
being
right.
blind, you can still see certain people can see certain stuff, but it's not always complete darkness and certain things. So I think I've
It's
probably learned a lot more, but I think it's
and
more
it's
learning
not
about.
indeed. Yeah, it's not. And I have usable vision. I can see a lot a bit. Um, I will tell you that people who cannot see anything, it's not about, you're right. It's not darkness. It's just described, if they're able to describe it at all. It's described as an absence of sight, meaning that sense is kind of absent. It's not there. But
Yeah,
many blind people, along with myself, are not able to describe well what it is truly truly like. As far as seeing goes, what can you see? Well, it's kind of a hard concept. It's kind of a hard thing to understand for a lot of people. You know.
yeah.
So specifically, what have you learned? What new information have you gained or learned by working with this organization as it relates to just blind people?
And yeah, it was more. I think the concept in itself about the Trevor Hands app, I thought was a great idea when initially I started learning more about it. And I thought that's a really good concept. That's something you sort of want to be a part of has like a greater impact on other people. It's not something like, I guess I'm currently sort of working part time at Tesco, but I'm sort of there to a means end of just earning the money, etc. And I'm sort of happy with that. But if I wasn't getting paid for that job, I wouldn't necessarily be there. But I think this having a positive impact on sort of society itself is something I sort of want to be a part of as well. But yeah, in terms of just about learning more about sort of blindness and stuff, I think it's sort of just the myths and misconceptions about blind people or people with visual impairments. I think there was a sort of thing when I started off, is sort of people not necessarily liking the term blind because not all people are blind. It's more I've been sort of I guess sort of told to more use the term visually impairment or visually
Right.
impaired
And
people.
I'm and I want to teach you a little bit about that. I'm the opposite of that. Everyone is different, right? And it's all a spectrum. I tend to not use the word impairment because it doesn't impair. It doesn't prevent me from doing something, you see. So, you have to think critically about what impairment means, right? So, um, I call myself blind. even though I see. I call myself blind because really I am. So it really depends on the person. Blind people are sensitive about this issue. Um, and blind people in general can be sensitive about many things, but people these days I think are quite sensitive. So blind people are sensitive about the word blind or the word about visually impaired. I would say if you meet someone who's blind, just listen for how they describe themselves. Um, in the States, I say I'm blind simply because I am. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, blind people are weird about that, though. Mm-hmm.
I guess everyone has, I guess, different sort of certain aspects and certain things they're happy with hearing and certain things that sort of that's not how they like to sort of hear it described and stuff. I think it's a sort of a difficult sort of, I guess, concept to describe in a way, sort of thing. How would you sort of how would you sort of phrase it? I guess would you sort of visually impaired people or blind or yeah, I guess it sort of is difficult to
Right.
sort of come up
Right.
with the
Well,
right
I
phrase
would
sometimes, isn't it?
say, yeah, I would say blind people.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. But that's just me. That's what I
Mm.
happen to say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. I think it was also just sort of learning more stuff. I guess even about I was even about the little things like even though I knew visually impaired people or blind people would use technology as smartphones and stuff, that's something that did sort of, I guess, sort of, I thought if it took me a while to sort of get my head around how does that work? How would they be using a smartphone, etc. But I guess
Well,
is
basically, I mean, it depends. It depends on the person and what phone they have access to. I have the Apple phone, the X Max. And so Apple in general is really the best as far as accessibility goes, for blind people. But there's voiceover that basically reads the screen and provides information, you know. And then there's, audio messages. Blind people depend heavily on audio, a lot of audio messages. That's why on Messenger I was sending you audio clips, because I think that sending audio messages to someone makes them a lot, it increases, I think, the accountability, I think, when you send an audio clip. So
yeah, I
I've,
100% agree. Yeah,
I, I've noticed I've noticed that a lot of people do not send audio clips back to me. Not just you, but most people don't send them back to me, which I mean, that doesn't bother me, but it's just kind of cool. It's just kind of an interesting thing to notice.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I think it's sort of like I guess I'm generally used to just texting and stuff, but then when you actually think about it, sending a voice message, it does make you sound a bit more human, a bit more sort of you are a real person, etc. It's probably a bit more like having a
I mean,
telephone conversation, isn't it? I guess
right.
rather than yeah.
And isn't that, I'm just saying, I tell people, wouldn't it be easier to just do the audio clip? You just hold the
Mm.
microphone and just talk. Isn't that easier than just typing, type with your fingers on the board?
Yeah, I know. I think so. I think whenever I think about doing that, then I don't. Or when I'm on the phone, you sort of I never like phrase myself properly, or when texting, it's
Hmm.
easier then go. Oh, I'll delete that. I'll come back and correct that. Oh, I don't want to word that
It's
right.
okay. So that's
And
so
yeah,
that's interesting. So there's still some apprehension about sending an
mm,
audio clip that you'll get it wrong.
yeah. I
Mm.
guess you might sort of say the wrong thing, or you might sort of not phrase that properly. I'll delete that, and then ends up just taking longer. Then takes about 5 minutes. Then you end up like doing like 5 audio clips, deleting them all, and end up just writing. Sorry, I'll just end up typing it instead. Probably that's probably what I'll end up doing. But I guess something
That's
over
int-
time, if you got used to doing it, you'd be a better speaker, I guess.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. It used to be. I mean, I'm 29 years old.
Mm,
And it used to be in the olden days, people would send letters, and that was considered to be an art form because it was basically your only outlet for communication. And if you were a really good writer, if you really knew how to write a letter, you could really convey a lot of important information properly the first time.
mm,
So it certainly is a skill, definitely the communication. But I think I think most blind people, certainly the majority or many of them who are Londoners, would have access to a smartphone, at least an iPhone, if not a smartphone. So
mm.
it
Yeah, oh
is.
yeah, it's just something I never used to think about before because I'd never been around people
Sure,
who
sure.
couldn't who had sort of
Totally,
struggles and visual. Yeah,
totally fine. Yeah, yeah. So
mm,
this travel hands, this part, this the travel hands aspect of the company. So is that like a mobile application yet, or is that still in beta?
I get the app's still in need of development. I think there's no actual app we've got out there at the minute. I think if we did start doing volunteers, I think it would be, you'd basically be paired on an Excel spreadsheet. It would be I don't know, Dan is partnered with Anna, and that will happen at a certain time. So I guess I remember someone messaging saying, is it similar to like Uber? I guess it's sort of slightly similar to Uber in terms that, if you need to go from A to B, but I don't think there would be. I think it would probably be partnered in advance. I don't think it would be like an instant thing. Like when you have Uber, you sort of end up booking an Uber and you see a car see a car driving towards you, and you know it's on its way. I don't think it'd be that sort of thing. Maybe you might just end up being paired for someone and meeting with someone at a certain specific time. I think that would probably be how it works. But obviously, I don't know all the details. That we can sometimes maybe discuss this issue. I think in the coming weeks, I think he'll be able to get into much more detail on that sort of side of the company.
Right. And I will certainly get with him and speak to him about it. I hope. Yeah, I will reach out to him. I'm kind of it's a bit of a long story. I'm not talking about it on my podcast. It's a bit of a long story. I'm going through something right now. I gotta take things one day at a time right now. So I only go from podcast episode to episode, one story at a time. But I will get to Ishan and talk to him. But you're doing fine though. You're doing great explaining it the best you can like this. I think
Oh,
that's I
good,
think
good to
that's
know. Yeah.
really I think that's really good. Yes. Yes, to be truthful, to be fair and to be honest, yeah, do you need do you need to learn more? Yeah, sure you do. And I'm sure that when you keep working with them, you'll learn more information about how this works. The other thing that occurred to me, or the other difference between this type of thing and Uber is that Uber is 24 hours a day, but everybody's in a car, in a vehicle. So how would you convince volunteers to work at night?
Yeah, good point. I guess that's something not something I've personally thought about really before, coming on the podcast. But yeah, I think that's definitely a tricky thing. I think it'd be just different volunteers will have different schedules. They'll work around. Personally, they might say, "Oh, our nights work for me. I've got that free." Or I guess that's the sort of the beauty of it in many ways, that certain volunteers in London or in general before would be happy volunteering, but it would just be the flexibility they'd struggle with. So I think with this, they can fit it around their day. If they're certain people who can on nights that suits them, or early mornings suits them, that fits around their day. That would just be sort of different people, I guess, would suit different time scales.
Right, right. But my point though is walking around at night
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of the world is different from driving at night.
Oh yeah, no,
So
very much so. Yeah, I think.
so there would need to be some sort of a motivation to encourage someone to stay up in the evening and do this at night, such as we'll pay you more pounds, we'll pay you more if you're willing to do it. Right.
Yeah, I think in terms of the actual incentive for volunteers, I think initially there's currently a sort of the thought that I think in measurements, and I guess the more we'll measure the steps the volunteers do, and I
Right.
guess with steps sort of converts into points. I think in terms of the sort of the idea and the concept is hopefully we'll be able to get a sponsor who'll be able to sponsor the app or sponsor the company, and then the volunteers who do a certain amount of steps at a certain point will be able to claim a reward. Say if we partnered up with a I don't know a small cafe in London, they'd be able to then cash in their points for a coffee or some sort of incentive, I guess. And that's sort of like the idea. But then obviously, I don't know if that will change in certain points, but that's like the general idea as it currently stands on this date.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there would have to be some sort of an incentive.
Mm.
Maybe British Airlines can do something where they get a vacation if they do really good work for an entire year. They get a flight or something to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Hmm.
just like make sure they're valued and their work is really
Right.
well thought of, I guess. And yeah.
Yeah. Great. Cool. So why would someone at present? Why would someone volunteer for this company at present?
When it mainly comes down to just for volunteering in general, I think I went through this before. I think I haven't got the exact sort of stats on me at the minute. But I think there was sort of volunteering in the UK. I think there was like 12.6 hours on average someone volunteers per week. And it was just sort of